We've all heard of foods that can be aphrodisiacs, right? Foods that can help increase our desire to have sex, to increase our libido, right? But there's a lot of different angles that we have to look at here. There's the blood flow angle, there's a blood pressure angle, there's an amino acid angle, there's the desire angle, there's the hormonal angle. So I've got 10 foods that increase libido, not just for men, but for women as well. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the first one. But we have to remember that some of these are working along different categories. You can possibly combine different ones as well, stack them to increase the effect. Some of them are more short-term, some of them are more long-term. Let's jump into the first one. But before we do that, after this video, check out ARMRA. If you've heard of colostrum before, bovine colostrum is a very, very potent bioactive compound that really comes out of a cow just before they start creating milk, right? Now, the idea behind colostrum is really to help give the antibodies that a calf needs. But up until recently, the ones that have been designed for humans really end up getting just adulterated because they have to heat them. ARMRA is very unique because they use a cold technology that does not break down the over 400 bioactive components of colostrum. So when it comes down to recovery, when it comes down to skin, when it comes down to hair, potentially even just feeling more energy, it is absolutely worth it. So I've started taking it on days that I feel more run down, not for immediate energy, but more so to help my recovery. So I put a link down below that saves you 15% off. If you've heard of colostrum before and you've been kind of burned by it because it just doesn't seem like it works, you have to try ARMRA because it is completely different. Because again, they're not heating it and killing off all the active components. So that link is down below in the top line of the description underneath this video. Okay, the first one is one that you've maybe heard of before. Oysters, right? We've heard of oysters as an aphrodisiac. And the funny thing is that it is pretty anecdotal. Like, we don't have concrete evidence that eating an oyster is going to do X, Y, Z. But we do know that oysters are pretty much the highest natural source of zinc. And we do have literature on that. So there was a study that was published in Human Reproductive Sciences that gave subjects 3 different doses of zinc or a placebo. And what they found is that all subjects that had the zinc had improved sexual desire. They also had just improved sexual markers across the board. And when they looked in a dose-dependent fashion, those that had more zinc had higher levels of testosterone. So the more zinc, the more testosterone. And we know there's a strong correlation between zinc and testosterone. You've heard of ZMA before and all these different supplements that have zinc for testosterone. So we know that exists. But one serving of oysters has 675% of your daily value of zinc. Now the thing is that it is somewhat of an acute effect, because if you're not getting a lot of zinc in and all of a sudden you have a big bolus of it, then yes, that could have an effect. But even better is the longer term effect if you have sustainable levels of zinc coming in. So yes, in the short term, if you eat some oysters, probably the combination of the fats, the proteins, and the zinc can definitely get things going a little bit. The next one is one that's kind of interesting. They're known as vegan oysters. They're known as vegan oysters because they have a lot of the same compounds that regular oysters do in a plant-based form, and that is pine nuts. So yes, pine nuts are super high in zinc, so you have the same potential mechanism there, but they're also insanely high in magnesium. Again, that old supplement, zinc, magnesium, ZMA, right? Zinc and magnesium work very well together. And in this particular case, there's cool literature with magnesium. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition took a look at subjects that were untrained with resistance training. And for 7 weeks, they had them go through resistance training along with either a placebo or magnesium at 8 milligrams of magnesium per kilogram of body weight. So a fair bit of magnesium. What they found is that there were higher levels of absolute testosterone in those that had the magnesium. But they also, when adjusted for their lean body mass, had higher amounts of testosterone as well, indicating that the magnesium's effect on lean body mass, along with resistance training, was quite pronounced when it came down to testosterone levels, not just in absolute fashion, but in accordance with lean body mass. What does that mean? That means that even if you're a small person taking less magnesium, it has a big impact, and it seems to be highly effective when combined with resistance training, which does seem to have an impact on testosterone as well. Next up is one that works along a slightly different pathway, and that's going to be watermelon. Watermelon contains citrulline. Okay, that is one of the primary things that makes it red. What's interesting about citrulline is if you look at the literature, It's pretty potent when it comes down to blood flow, and obviously blood flow plays a pretty important role with, well, sexual health and sexual function. So there's an interesting 22-day study that took a look at 100 milligrams, 500 milligrams, and 1,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight with citrulline. Now remember, citrulline converts into NO2 or supports NO2 production. So this is a pretty big effect, right? They found that all sexual performance measures increased across the board. Now here's the interesting thing. This study was actually done in rats, but the data was so strong that the researchers stated that this science could be applicable to humans suffering with erectile dysfunction. Now, how this can play into your overall libido is interesting. There's also literature that suggests that when you have erectile dysfunction, it actually affects your desire. And it's not just because you're down on yourself about it, it's the fact that if it's an extra barrier to entry or barrier to, get things going, it's going to affect your brain. We've all been in a situation where we're stressed out and it's hard to get in the mood because we're stressed out. Well, if you have one more mental barrier because you can't get it up very well, that's going to be a problem, right? So watermelon could be a very simple fix for this. The data is pretty strong. Next up, we've got beets. Now, beets are rich in nitrates, which also support NO2. So we're working along the same category here, but slightly different. There was an interesting study published in Pharmacology and Therapeutics that looked at NO2 specifically. They found that NO2 is a neurotransmitter that relaxes the smooth muscle cells inside the actual penis, that spongy tissue. Now, why is this so important? How is this different from, say, citrulline? Well, by relaxing or activating those sort of cells in the spongy tissue, it maintains the blood pressure. So nitrates are going to work a slightly different angle than, say, citrulline is, even though they're both still kind of going the same route. Now, that being said, if we activate NO2, there's a number of different health benefits that come with that. But being able to maintain an erection is pretty darn important for your libido. This next one's kind of interesting, and it's specific for women. It's Shatavari. All the literature here seems to be anecdotal, but it's so strong, it's worth mentioning. It's a relative of the asparagus family, and it's technically an herb. I've heard of it before. I've heard it talked about as an adaptogen, but I don't think it's much of an adaptogen. What it is a powerful phytoestrogen. So when women take it, it's such a unique type of phytoestrogen that it seems to increase their estradiol levels, which has a direct impact on their sexual desire. So if you're a lady and you're trying to get in the mood a little bit more, trying to help your marriage out, something like that, well, this might be something to check out. They have them on Amazon. You can find it anywhere. Next up is Maca, which is very potent for men and women. Okay, there was an interesting paper that took a look at postmenopausal women. Okay, and it gave them 3.3 grams of Maca or a placebo. They found that there was no effect on hormones, but there was an effect on libido and other markers of sexual health, not to mention improve their postmenopausal symptoms. So perhaps it takes longer. The other literature that I've seen on Maca suggests that it takes a while of taking Maca to really trigger its adaptogenic effects, because Maca seems to have an impact for men too in other hormone areas and sexual desire, right? So maybe it just takes some time, even though this literature was looking at a relatively short stint. So it just takes time maybe for the hormonal effects to potentially occur, but even still, as far as the symptoms are concerned and the feelings and the desire, it might work short term. Next up is Fenugreek, another one that works for men and women. For decades, we've known that Fenugreek seems to have an impact on testosterone in men, especially when you're getting over like 1,000 milligrams. But now there's some literature for women as well. Now, make no mistake, if you increase your testosterone level as a man or even as a woman, you're going to increase sexual drive. But the female literature is very interesting because they gave them 600 milligrams of Fenugreek per day or placebo. And it found that it increased their estradiol levels. Why is this interesting? Because how come Fenugreek seems to increase testosterone in men, but increases estradiol in women? Could it be a powerful adaptogen? Could it be helping our body find that homeostasis to get our levels up in the appropriate category? Because with women, it didn't just help their estradiol levels, it also helped their sexual desire. So there's something going on there. Anyhow, moving on to the next one. Chicken breast or turkey? What the heck? Well, these particular white meats are very high in arginine. Could you go take an arginine supplement? Sure, but if you're like me, I don't want to have a million supplements laying around. I'd rather just eat the food. What is it about arginine? Well, there was a study published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine. It was interesting because it was a meta-analysis. It took a look at 540 people throughout 10 different studies. They found that just 1.5 to 5 grams of arginine was enough to combat erectile dysfunction and improve sexual desire. This isn't one knockoff study. This is a large amount of data. What's most interesting about this is that an average large chicken breast has 9 grams of arginine. So you're getting a lot of this from good quality meat anyway. You could supplement it for sure, but if you're gonna get 5 to 9 grams in a medium to a large sized chicken breast, doing this every day could truly support your sexual health, especially if erectile dysfunction is your issue. When you look at the correlations between sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, and metabolic dysfunction, it's quite uncanny. They're all pretty correlated. And when you look at metabolic dysfunction, when you look at metabolic syndrome, well, what's their diet usually consistent of? Processed, refined garbage, and not a lot of protein. Anyhow, moving on to the next, apples, because of quercetin specifically. So once again, you could eat apples, you could eat capers, you could find some other foods that are rich in quercetin. You could take a quercetin supplement because the literature is strong with quercetin, but apples do have quite a fair bit in that apple peel itself. As a matter of fact, the American Heart Association published a paper looking at 7 trials with 587 people, so again, a lot of data, finding that quercetin reduced blood pressure. And this, again, has a very strong correlation. You're talking about arterial health, healthy circulatory system, healthy blood flow, which again, helps you down there, which helps you up here. And lastly, there was a study published in Sexual Medicine that looked at the Mediterranean diet as a whole. They found, in short, the higher the adherence to a Mediterranean diet, the better their sexual health, the better their libido, better overall symptoms of depression, better overall symptoms of anxiety, a number of different things. So it has to do probably with the high amount of flavonols, so you're getting lower inflammation, better blood pressure, more polyphenols, overall better health in general. So it's hard to pinpoint what it is specifically about that Mediterranean diet, but it was dose dependent in the sense that the higher the adherence on a scale of 1 to 10, the most adhered to the Mediterranean diet equaled the best sexual function. So what can we take away from that? Lean meats, healthy monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats, not eating rancid oils and garbage soybean oil, stuff like that. Okay? We want to be eating high amounts of fiber. We want our carbohydrates to come from fruit and from wholesome sources whenever we can. We want sweet potatoes. We want things like that. We want high amounts of omega-3s. Hey, we want a lot of seafood. What do you know? Zinc. It kind of makes some sense. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.